2, identifying what the needs are. We want to be clear what is going on in your community. And so many times, they'll say, you've done a lot of projects before. Tell us what the needs are in the community. And again, I don't have a lot of answers. I mean, there are a lot of communities that I work in over and over and over again. I'm very familiar with the Dallas area. I am actually born in Texas. I was born in Lubbock and lived in Wichita Falls, and my brother lives here, and I've been down to Texas dozens and dozens of times. But the reality of it is that I live in Utah. I need to tap into what you know about your communities. What are the needs in your community? And if you don't know, here are 10 ways you can go out and find out what the needs are. If you don't know. Sometimes our churches are so disconnected from the community that they have no fathomable idea about what's going on in their communities. All they know is what happens inside the boundaries of our walls, whoever shows up and comes in through the front door. There are ways to find this out. There are ways to find out what the needs are. And so we will help you do that to mine that information out. But thinking about the building as a ministry tool, that is very, very important. And thinking beyond Sunday mornings and Wednesday nights. How many different ways can you use a project throughout the course of the week? You've sensed from the discussions this morning that this building is used as a pre-K learning center. They derive a fairly major portion of their income, and it'll be ever increasing. Right now, they're not at full capacity. This is designed to hold 200 plus children. Right now, 3 months into it, they have 91 children here. They received their first check, was it, Brett? They received a $15,000 check just yesterday or the day before for the first turnaround. Yeah, Pastor, you mentioned that at dinner last night. So we'll see how that goes in the future, but the idea is to use the building throughout the week to receive income, which will supplement some of the decisions that were made financially in this project. But more than ever, how do we plug into the lives of those people who are bringing their kids in the front door? Some of those people are the unchurched of our communities. It's that back to that creating people flow. How do we do that in an intentional way? Childcare is a tremendously good way to do that. But I got to tell you, prior to getting involved, and you're going to hear from Eric in just a few minutes, prior to getting involved in the childcare approach towards things, I had met so many churches that had childcare facilities in their facilities that were major sources of contention amongst the members of the church. They were not operating efficiently. They were not operating well. The main problem being that the church maybe had 3 or 4 rooms that attended to the needs of small children, and they said, well, rather than letting these rooms sit fallow, we'll start a preschool, and they will put 30 or 40, maybe 50 kids in a preschool, and it's almost impossible to get on top of it financially when you have that few kids going on in your preschool program. My kids attended, my kids are older now, they're 29, 31, and 34. But when my kids were little, we sent them 2 blocks away to a preschool that was very well known in our area, that was run by a church. There were 45 kids in that preschool. Not once in 9 years did anybody ever make an attempt to connect to my wife and I personally. Not one time. Talk about missed opportunities. I did a 28,000 square foot building for them. They had no idea that my kids had gone to preschool there. And I knew from doing that project that preschool was a major source of contention because they were losing money on it every year. And they said, oh, well, it's our ministry. They weren't ministering to my kids. My kids were not learning about Jesus Christ. They were just being really kind to my kids and being very generous to us for a low tuition rate. But they had entirely missed, like most churches do, the creation of people flow and the income generation that can come from a well-run preschool. We work with Heather, is in the back over here. Heather, wave your hand up in the air. She's with Learning Care Group. Learning Care Group has got this figured out. This is a group like Nelson that's got it. They understand how to run a preschool. Don't try and do something you don't understand. Turn it around to something that becomes a positive from a cash flow standpoint, and your job then is to figure out how to train those kids in Christ and how to tap into the lives of the parents that will come in. They just started a program. Pastor ducked his head back out, but he was telling me last night they just started a parent training program on weeknights after the kids are picked up. That's a way to begin to tap into the relationship side of these families. That begins to make sense from a ministry standpoint. So, Childcare is an excellent way for that to happen if it's done right. If it's not done right, avoid it at all costs because it will divide your church. Becoming a ministry that's impacting the next generation. This is an age group, too, where these kids are vulnerable. This is an age group when we can talk to them about who Christ is and embed that in their minds at a very early age. These are just examples that I'm going to flip through of different child care facilities. Let's see if we can get that to roll. Community centers. Matt, when he was up here, flashed some pictures up of Hub 801, home of Genesis Project Church. In May of 2014, BGW opened a 25,000 square foot for-profit event center in Ogden, Utah. We had Hill Air Force Base events there. We had Cannondale Bicycles come in for 3 days. We've had quinceaneras. We've had weddings. We've had a number of events. And over the course of the next 7 or 8 months, establish a for-profit business in the heart of our community in Ogden. It was a converted Coca-Cola bottling plant that we took 25,000 square feet and changed over. In January of 2015, the Genesis Project was introduced into this building. They had been itinerant for a number of years, floating from warehouse space to warehouse space. They were a church of 900. In 6 months, I was at an event with Matt on June 23rd, 2015. I'll never forget that date, and asked him, how is your congregation doing? And in 6 months, he had grown from 900 to 1,300 because he finally had space that worked for them. He finally had a sound system and a lighting system that worked for them. And we started a process at that point of going from a non-lease payment to a lease situation to an ownership position and turn the business over to the church to operate. So the church now today runs a event center, a for-profit event center, about a third to a half of which covers their mortgage payment on the purchase of the building. So this was done for financial reasons, but more importantly, there are about 2,000 people a week that flow through this building that are exposed to the Genesis Project Church. Believers Church over in Chesapeake, Hub 757, also runs a daycare preschool development program. So they have both. They have both an event center. Their worship space is used as event center space. Their lobby or third space is also used as conjoining space for those kinds of events. But they also operate out of a separate entry point, childcare. They've got 2 sources of income going on. Again, you're going to hear more about this from Eric a little bit later on, but these are ways that a church can become embedded into their community. But you have to be intentional. It doesn't just work to have 2,000 people flow in your building. If you don't tell them who you are, we've missed an opportunity. So this is a way to create that people flow and then to impact their lives. At Matt's church, the folks that Matt reaches into the lives of are people coming out of prison halfway houses, prostitution, drug rehab programs, so on and so forth. These are people that are being trained in the event center about how to reignite into real life. These are training programs, job training programs, where people learn how to become re-socialized to society again. So these are the sorts of things that we can do. We can not just serve the needs of the community through the leasing of an event center space, but we can also change lives within the church itself. That's a picture of the main space, which seats about 750 people. Athletics and fitness, this is Annapolis Area Christian School. We finished this project, 88,000 square feet. Almost from the get-go, they were able to lease this building out for a total of combined 4 months a year to local athletic programs. The other 8 months were used by the school. But the lease programs in the 3 gymnasiums and the field house largely pay the mortgage on this 88,000 square foot project. They're embedded in the community because they become relevant with both the facility and the surrounding fields into the athletic lives of these folks. And they become exposed to who they are as a Christian organization. So athletics, we're doing one right now in Harrison, Ohio. The YMCA, by the way, had largely become detached from the Christian church over the past 40 years. They used to be closely affiliated with the Christian church, and they largely became divorced from their Christian roots. That's changing. they're now figuring out how to embed back into churches. So we're planning a YMCA facility paired with LifeSpring Church in Harrison, Ohio. They're making intentional efforts to reconnect their Christian roots, who they are. So this is going to be a facility that has a lobby, like you see out here, a third space, that will serve during the week as the lobby space for the YMCA. So they'll have both athletics and other church-related type things going on in that space. So, very important to consider all the different options, whether they be fitness. We've done a variety of facilities that are just simple fitness facilities. Olathe Church a Living Hope Church in Olathe, Kansas, where they created a space. Actually, in their lobbies, we have a storage space off to the side where they bring these interlocking mats out, and during the week, 3 mornings a week, they open it up to the moms in the neighborhood to come in and run exercise classes in that space. That building is about a third the size of this project right here. But it's the major connecting point because they bring their kids in and let the kids go into the play area, supervised, while the moms go out and do exercise, and their coffee bar then becomes a juice bar. But it's a way to integrate into the lives of some of the local moms that live in the neighborhood surrounding the church. An area that is very interesting is that churches are almost automatically entrusted with children and older people. So senior care is one of those areas that you can have a meaningful impact into your community. It has to be the right location. And by the way, in all of these options, there is a business analysis that is done for your area to make sure you're not just moving this forward on a hunch. There is a business analysis, and Eric, you'll get into that a little bit later and talk about that. We're doing a senior care facility at Journey Church in Apopka, Florida. Obviously, Florida is a tremendously fertile ground for older people. I guess it's taxes. They don't have taxes there. Is that the deal? I think that's what attracts them. I've never actually asked that question, but I think they've got a very low tax rate for seniors coming down from places that are heavily taxed areas. So we're planning a 65,000 square foot senior facility that will graduate people to the next level of care. So they've got a 4-stage process to move people from simple assisted living to a more intensive care facility as they progress through their aging years. But again, it can be terribly, terribly good in terms of meeting people, not the seniors, the family of the seniors. My mom's in a senior care unit in Denver, Colorado right now. The ministry that happens is not to my mom. My mom has no idea who's coming in the door and who's left. She has no idea who she's met, who she hasn't met. It's to us, because we've entrusted my mother to a facility, and we have gotten to know that staff intimately. That's where the ministry lies, is with the families of the people. Well, senior care is one of those things that also can be financially very, very helpful to a church organization, if it's the right location. Education centers, performing arts centers. We've seen a number of performing arts centers. We're doing one in Escondido, California right now. New Vintage Church has just purchased an existing dilapidated 600-seat theater. We're going to renovate the theater, and we're building 19,000 square feet, 2-story childcare space next to it in downtown Escondido. This is a facility that will serve 9 different arts organizations in their community. They are going to integrate and create a connection point to arts organizations and then connect to society that way. On Friday night, this is going to be one happening place, not for church, but for whatever art type of thing is going on, whether it be gallery stroll or whether it be a performance drama type thing or a music event. So again, a lot of commonalities between worship places for worship, and good quality space for the performing arts. A lot of duplicate uses between good quality childcare space and the needs of the church. Good similarities between event center space and what's needed for church space. That's the common thread that we see in a lot of these different facilities. Entrepreneurial centers. This is a facility called the Salt Mine Project. Let's see if I can get it to come up. Whoops. I'll go back to that. Salt Mine Project in Salt Lake City, Utah. There we go, it'll pop up in a second. The salt mine was introduced into our community by a group of churches from the Atlanta area. They came in and created 19,000 square feet of space. Maybe it'll come up this time. There we go. 19,000 square feet of space that is for lease space for your business as you're starting your business out. They come in. These kinds of workspace type things are the up and coming trend. They're all over the nation now. This is also home to a church planting organization. They have a room that seats 180 people that's used during the week for conferencing events and those kinds of things, training events. It's also used on Sundays, the least used time for a business center. It's used as the birthplace for a new church outreach that's going on in Salt Lake City, Utah, in a suburb in Sandy, Utah. So these are the kinds of things that you can do. And not only that, but the people in the church now are leasing space inside the entrepreneurial center, and they're beginning to get to know, they're infusing themselves into the path of the people who are unbelieving people coming in there for simply business purposes. So this is the kind of overlap that you can begin to experience to take advantage of these kinds of people flows. Cafes in third place. How many of you all have heard the term third place? Okay, several of you, maybe half of you have heard the term third place. So baby boomers largely operated out of two places. Their relationships were born in work and neighborhood, work and home. As subsequent generations came along, Matt's generation, I didn't know you were a Gen X till last night, Matt, but Matt's a Gen X guy. Matt's generation and subsequent generations began to demand more of community-styled spaces, particularly this millennial generation. The millennial generation born between 1980 and in the year 2000, roughly in those terms, depending on who's telling the story here. That generation largely is very much wanting to be connected to community space. Well, churches have figured out that we can create a space that people are incorporated into the body in that space, not in here. They may come and have a very worshipful personal experience in here or hear God's word in here, but in terms of the relationships that are fostered that lead to a discipling type of situation, it happens out there. That's third place. So creating quality third place has caused these buildings to have to create narthex space on steroids. When I first got involved in architecture, a narthex was a place where you came in, you had some coat racks, you shook the rain off your coat and hung up your coat, grabbed the bulletin and went into worship. And after worship, you came back out, boom, gone to the parking lot because it was too crowded. I mean, the narthex spaces were a 20th the size of the worship space. Those kinds of buildings are struggling now because they don't have space where people can create the kinds of relationship. 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, it didn't matter because people were integrated all week long in their communities. They didn't stray 35 miles to go to work. They worked in their communities. They knew each other throughout the week. But we live fractured lives. So people have to be more intentional about infusing themselves into the network of relationships that occurs in a church. If somebody finally gets the courage to come to your church and open the door and cross that threshold, which is a major event for some people, you've got to be able to connect to them. You've got to figure out how do we, other than handing them a bulletin, you've got to figure out a way for that to happen. And third place is where that happens. I remember back in when I first got involved, at BGW, I'd done probably 20 churches. Nothing that approached cafe-type space the way that we do them now. I mean, you saw it out there. It's a real cafe for all intents and purposes. It's a real cup of coffee. It actually tasted like coffee this morning. It was the real deal. People have a different set of expectations for those kinds of things. I thought that the upscale Starbucks-like experience was going to be a fad. It's not a fad. It's only getting stronger. It's an expectation now that you're going to be hospitable and accommodating to people when they come in, and you're going to serve them a real cup of coffee, not something that tastes like a brown crayon dipped in hot water. That's the way we used to do it. Mrs. Folgers, remember? You just put some Mrs. Folgers in there, and that was good enough. Mrs. Folgers don't cut it anymore. You have to have something that's a little bit more of a experience, for better word. So cafe spaces are critically important, and it is the space where people are made to feel like they're welcome. If you design a really wonderful third place and you have a great cafe and the church is not ready to receive them, don't bother. It's not the cafe in the third place that convinces people. It's the relationships born out of that space. That space facilitates people who have already made a mindset change. I attend a evangelical free church in Salt Lake City, Utah that's been in existence as a missions church since 1871 to Brigham Young. We're a little more modern now than we were in 1871, but In that church, the reason I stuck to that church is because when I was a college student 40 years ago, Eunice Bellamy and Dorothy Ernst, some of the people that at the time I thought were so ancient, they were over 60, so ancient, were inviting my roommates and I over to their homes for pork chops on Sunday afternoons. It was the creation of that relationship around food that caused us to stick. We were eating hot dogs and ragu all week long, and spaghetti, because we knew how to cook spaghetti. We could deal with warming up some ragu or cooking some hot dogs and slathering them with mustard. But in terms of real food, we were not getting real food. And Dorothy Ernst and Eunice Bellamy figured out missions to college students through this. Tremendously powerful. A cafe, tremendously powerful if it's used with intentionality behind reaching into the lives of people that will walk through that front door. Thinking outside the box a little bit, this is Shield of Faith down in Southern California in Pomona. This is an organization that has already tapped into public monies twice to create living situations for the African American population in their community. And now they're doing a facility that is a place to go live. They're tearing 2 bars down. They're in the process of purchasing the land that the bars sit on. They're going to create places to live, places to create a worship center / event center, and places for doing retail inside to create a marketplace environment in their location. Let me see. I have to skip forward on that. So things like the things that we see in our everyday communities. So again, merging and blurring the line between church and the community. And then figuring out when those people start to flow past you, how do we connect into them? How does that work?